Welcome back to Nordic Arms and History. In today's video, we're talking about the Stridsvagn M21 and the later version, the M21-29. We'll be talking about, of course, the history of it, the development and its use, and of course, its fate as well. And we'll also be talking about the cool thing where 10 of them were, of course, put together by smuggled parts from Germany. So pretty cool and interesting. And of course, we'll be mentioning this because, of course, we've talked about the first Norwegian tank, the Rikstanken or the L120. So if you haven't seen that video, feel free to watch that as well. And of course, that means we should also talk about Swedish tanks. So let's begin. In the aftermath of World War I, Sweden remained neutral but recognized the emerging significance of tanks in modern warfare. The mechanized battlefield in the Western Front had demonstrated that armored vehicles could break through entrenched positions and transform military strategy. Although Sweden had not participated in the conflict, its military leadership paid close attention to these developments, recognizing that the tank was not just a passing innovation, but a revolution in land warfare. The Swedish Army sought to develop its own armored capability. The first step came in 1921, when Sweden imported a French Renault FT for evaluation. The FT was a groundbreaking design during the war. It had a rotating turret and a compact form that influenced future tank development globally. However, its performance in Swedish conditions was disappointing. Reports noted that it was underpowered, difficult to maintain, and unsuited for operations in Sweden's rough and often forested terrain. The Renault FT was deemed too expensive and unreliable for adoption. Swedish military planners turned their attention to Germany. Although the Treaty of Versailles prohibited Germany from producing or exporting tanks, it had developed the LK2, an advanced light tank prototype, just before the war ended. The LK2 was never deployed in combat, but had shown promise. Recognizing its potential, Swedish officials negotiated a secret deal to purchase 10 LK2 tanks. These were shipped in crates marked as agricultural equipment to avoid scrutiny by the Allied Disarmament Commission. This clandestine operation was a clever workaround, allowing Sweden to bypass international restrictions while acquiring advanced military technology. Once the parts had arrived in Sweden in late 1921, assembly began at military workshops and possibly at private firms such as AB Landsverk and NOHAB. By April 1922, all tanks had been completed. Sweden designated them as Stridsvagn M21, or Tank Model of 1921. These vehicles showed the birth of the Swedish tank force. Although based on a German design, they symbolized Sweden's ambition to establish an independent and capable armored corps. By the late 1920s, tank design was evolving quickly. The M21, while a valuable starting point, was becoming outdated in terms of power, speed, and battlefield utility. In response, Swedish engineers initiated a modernization program. 5 of the original 10 tanks were upgraded in 1929 with more powerful engines, updated machine guns, and improved electrical systems. The modified version was designated the Stridsvagn M21-29. These upgrades extended the tank's service life and ensured that Sweden could continue training its armored units while awaiting the development of more modern domestic designs. Unlike the mass production models of World War I, the STRV M21 and the M21-29 were built in extremely limited numbers. As we know, only 10 tanks were assembled, all derived from the disassembled LK2 kits imported from Germany. Their construction was supervised by the Swedish Army Ordnance Corps, with private firms such as AB Landsverk and NOHAB contributing to the manufacturing and final assembly. The tanks were delivered to the military by April 1922. Initially designated as FM22 or Forsöksmodell or trial model, they were later renamed M21 to reflect the year of order. These vehicles were not built from scratch in Sweden, but rather disassembled from parts produced in Germany. However, the experience of building and maintaining these vehicles played a key role in developing Sweden's industrial capacity for armored vehicle production. Let's take a closer look at the technical side of the Stridsvagn M21 and its upgraded sibling, the M21-29. Starting with the Stridsvagn M21, the tank weighed just under 10 tons. It measured about 5.7 meters long, 2 meters wide, and 2.5 meters tall. The crew typically consisted of 3 to 4 men. Its armor thickness ranged from 4 mm to 14 mm, enough to stop rifle fire, but not much more. It was armed with two 6.5mm Kulsprutetpistol M14 machine guns. Power came from a 55 horsepower Daimler-Benz 4-cylinder petrol engine. On flat roads, it could reach speeds of around 16 kilometers per hour, and with a full tank, it had a range of roughly 65 to 70 kilometers. Now on to the upgraded M21-29. In 1929, 5 of these tanks were upgraded. The new version was fitted with a Scania Vabis 1554 engine, producing 85 horsepower. This increased the top speed slightly, to about 18 kilometers per hour. Other improvements included electrical upgrades, like a new alternator and headlights. The machine guns were also updated, switching to the newer Kulspruttepistol M14-29. The upgrades in 1929 improved the tank's mobility and operational reliability. The new Scania engine provided better torque, which was especially useful in off-road conditions. The addition of a basic electrical system, including headlights, marked a small but significant step towards modernizing the tank fleet. The STRV featured a front-mounted engine and a driver's compartment positioned right behind it, and behind that again was the turret mounted towards the rear. The turret was a one-man design, requiring the commander to also serve as a gunner. Communication within the tank was rudimentary at best, often relying on shouting and tapping. Suspension was primitive, with no shock absorption, making it for a bumpy ride in rough terrain. Still, the fully enclosed tracks were a notable design element, helping to reduce track fouling and increase survivability in muddy or forested areas. Compared to its contemporaries, the Stridsvagn M21 was modest but serviceable. It lacked a cannon, which limited its offensive potential, but its twin machine guns were sufficient for training and for demonstrating the basic principles of armored warfare. Most importantly, it provided Sweden with a platform to build experience and begin developing indigenous designs. Once operational, the 10 STRV M21s were assigned to the Svea Livgarde in Stockholm. Here, they formed Sweden's first tank unit. In the early 1920s, this unit's primary mission was to conduct training and participate in military exercises, helping the army explore the practical use of tanks in Swedish terrain. Field exercises revealed the vehicle's strengths and limitations. On the positive side, the tanks proved capable of traversing forested and uneven ground, areas where wheeled vehicles struggled. On the downside, their speed was limited, their armor insufficient for frontline combat, and their internal layout cramped. Yet, for a nation just entering the armored age, the M21 proved an invaluable learning tool. These tanks became the centerpiece of Sweden's annual war games, serving as experimental units to test infantry support tactics and mobility doctrines. Swedish officers began developing operational concepts that would later inform the structure of Sweden's armored forces in the 1930s and beyond. A pivotal moment in the history of the Stridsvagn M21-29 occurred in 1929, when Heinz Guderian, a German Reichswehr officer who would later become the architect of Blitzkrieg, visited Sweden. At the time, Germany was prohibited from developing or operating tanks under the Treaty of Versailles. During his visit, Guderian test drove one of the upgraded STRV M21-29 tanks, gaining his first hands-on experience with armored vehicles. Many historians believe that this experience helped shape his evolving views on the importance of mobility, speed, and combined arms, which would later underpin German armored doctrine. Guderian's visit also had diplomatic and industrial consequences. Shortly after, German industrial interests took a stronger role in Swedish tank development. Notably, the German firm GHH invested in AB Landsverk. German engineer Otto Merker, who had worked on the early tank designs, was sent to Sweden to lead development projects at Landsverk. This partnership would eventually result in Sweden's first domestically designed tank, the STRV M31, delivered in the mid-1930s. Throughout the early 1930s, the upgraded STRV M21-29s remained in active service. They were used to train drivers, mechanics, and gunners, all of whom would later transition to more advanced vehicles. Because of Sweden's limited armored infantry during this period, the M21-29s often pulled double duty, appearing in both ceremonial parades and military training camps. Their operational relevance declined by the mid-1930s, as newer tanks like the STRV M31 and the later STRV M38 entered service. However, the legacy of the M21-29 was secure. These tanks had proven over a decade of frontline service in training and helped lay the foundation of Sweden's future armored forces. The 5 unmodified M21 tanks were retired in the early 1930s. Some were scrapped, others cannibalized for parts, and a few were used as stationary training hulks or gunnery targets. The upgraded M21-29s remained operational until around 1938. By then, the Swedish Army had begun to modernize its armored forces with more capable vehicles, and the M21-29's limitations were too significant to overlook. Despite this, several tanks were preserved due to their historical value. One example was displayed in Sweden's Tank Museum at Oxvall, later moved to Arsenalen, or the Swedish Tank Museum. Another made its way to Germany and now resides at the Deutsches Panzermuseum in Münster. Painted in a period-correct German camouflage, it is preserved as a speculative example of how the LK-2 might have appeared in wartime service, despite never actually being fielded by Germany. The most ambitious preservation effort came in the early 2000s, when a group of Swedish enthusiasts and military historians began restoring a STRV M21-29 to running condition, using original parts wherever possible and manufacturing replacements when needed, including a period-correct Scania engine and track components. The team successfully brought the tank back to life. In 2018, it was showcased at a public event to mark the 100th anniversary of its German design lineage. Today, this restored M21-29 is believed to be the oldest drivable German-designed tank in existence. It serves as a testament to not only the durability of early armored engineering, but also to the commitment of Sweden's historical preservation community. It continues to run at selected military vehicle shows and is a popular exhibit at Arsenalen. Alright, that's it for the video. If you have any questions regarding the Stridsvagn, feel free to comment them down below. Also, if you have any stories you want to share as well, feel free to comment them. If you feel like this video deserves it and you learned something new or found it to be interesting, feel free to like the video. That does recommend it to more people. And as usual, if you want to learn more about Nordic arms and history, consider subscribing. Until the next one, take care. Bye-bye.